Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. Please remember to like the video and make sure that you are still subscribed. Thank you all for your comments and discussion over the last few videos. I appreciate the input. A lot of people seem to have a lot of thoughts about the Arctic News blog posts, extinction by 2020. And if I didn't make it clear in the video, I feel like people maybe were a little confused about what I was saying, but I wasn't saying that I didn't believe that we could see collapse in 2020. I said it's possible. You know, it's among many possibilities. Just me personally, I would just put it on the lower end of possibility. That doesn't mean that we're not in serious trouble. That doesn't mean that, you know, we couldn't see collapse in 2021 or 2022 or 2023 or 2024 or 2025. You know, I don't know. People have made predictions before and they've been wrong. It doesn't mean that they're terrible people or they shouldn't be listened to or they're complete, you know, lunatics. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means they made an educated prediction and they were wrong. And that's all really anybody is doing. Even scientists and non-scientists alike. People are making, predictions based on the information that they have at hand. I'll say it again. I'll repeat myself one more time. Again, I think even if we saw a huge methane release, you know, is probably, you know, collapse or extinction, might take a few years to actually unfold, right? You'd see just cascading effects from the methane release that might just evolve a little bit slower than I just think 2020 is like, boom, you know, a little bit of an incredibly abrupt, on time scales, Earth global time scales, but I could be wrong. Who knows? All anybody is doing here is seeing, you know, taking a look at what's going on and seeing what's happening and kind of making their best guesses at it. I want to bring this to you from Robert Hunsaker from December 19th, 2019, titled Biosphere Collapse? 5 years ago, nations of the world met in Paris to draft a climate agreement that was subsequently accepted by nearly every country in the world, stating that global temperatures must not exceed the +2 Celsius pre-industrial. Global emissions must be cut. Fossil fuel usage must be cut. Today, following Paris 15, global banks have invested $1.9 trillion in fossil fuel projects. Not only that, global governments plan to increase fossil fuels by 120% by 2030. It's definitely in the wrong direction, including the U.S., China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, Canada, and Australia. Additionally, over the past 18 months, China has added enough new coal-based power generation, 43 gigawatts, to power 31 million new homes. China plans on adding another 148 gigawatts of coal-based power, which will equal the total current coal-generating capacity of the EU. Ooh-wee. India increased coal-fired power capacity by 74% over the past 7 years. The country expects to further increase coal-generated capacity by another 22% over the next 3 years. China is financing 25% of all new worldwide coal plant construction outside of its borders, e.g. South Africa, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Meantime, China, kissing goodbye to its commitment to cut emissions, cuts renewable power subsidies by 30%. This is the danger or the knock-on effect of the U.S. signaling to the rest of the world that we think climate change is a hoax, or we're not taking climate change seriously, or we're not going to do our part. We're not leading the way. Likewise, in the United States, Trump proposes slashing renewable budget items as his administration rebrands fossil fuels molecules of U.S. freedom. That's from Forbes, May 30th, 2019. Obviously, somebody in the White House scoffs at the general public as horribly, he spelled it pubic, public is horribly gullible, simple-minded, ignorant, and just plain stupid to fall for that one. Meanwhile, in America's most northerly town, Barrow, Alaska, is experiencing an unprecedented massive spike in methane emissions ongoing for the past 4 months, as monitored by Dr. Peter Carter. See more below. And in Madrid, COP25 was underway December 2nd through the 13th, with 25,000 participants from countries of the world gathered to hammer out the latest details on global warming and climate change. The question arises whether the conference had legs. By all appearances, it did not. Rather, it was another repeat climate sideshow, making matters even more surreal. Because of the above-mentioned death-defying global plans to accelerate fossil fuels by 120% by 2030, the Stockholm Environment Institute claims the world is on a pathway to 3C pre-industrial, probably locked in because of fossil fuel expansion across the globe. But caution, 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 the IPCC has already informed the world that 2C brings down the house. Not only that, scientists agree 1.5C is unbearably unlivable throughout many regions of the planet. In short, the world is on a colossal fossil fuel growth phase in the face of stark warnings from scientists that emissions must decline to net zero. Otherwise, the planet is destined to turn into a hothouse. As things stand today, it appears hothouse is baking into a cake, and hothouse implies too much heat disrupting and destroying too many ecosystems for the planet to support 7.8 billion people. For an insider's view of the goings-on at COP25, Dr. Peter Carter, an IPCC expert reviewer, was interviewed on December 10th. Following is a synopsis of that interview. He first mentioned the fact that 11,000 scientists have signed a paper stating we are definitely in a climate emergency. At COP a couple years ago, there was a lot of media given to the terrible fact that 4 of the countries had gotten together to block the most important IPCC report ever, which was the 2018 IPCC 1.5C report, showing that 2C, the old target since 1996, is total catastrophe. And 1.5C is still disastrous, but that is still where we must aim. Meaning, at 1.5 or 2C, we've already kicked off feedbacks that will accelerate warming, and that's that. COP has always been set up to fail. Scientists today agree 1.5C is possible only if we reduce emissions by 7% every year from next year so that we can reduce global emissions 50% by 2030. Comment: that's laughable. Check out global fossil fuel growth plans bursting at the seams. COP has always been set up to fail. However, the first COPs were hopeful. Ever since then, things have gone down, down, down. The reason why they are set up to fail is because when the convention was signed in 1992, it was stated that major decisions would be by consensus, but we still don't have a definition of consensus under the convention. That is absurd. The entire COP setup provides for 1 or 2 countries to veto any major decision, and that's what we've seen happen. The U.S., Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait block the science from the negotiations. But the U.S. are the good guys. In COP25, the science has been blocked completely, Carter said. Right now, all 3 major greenhouse gas concentrations, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, are accelerating. It means we are on a trend for total planetary catastrophe. We are on a trend for biosphere collapse. Carbon dioxide is on a rate exceeding anything over the past millions of years. We are at 412 parts per million. To put that into context, we have an ice core that goes back 2.2 million years. The highest CO2 over that period is 300 parts per million. Dear commenters that want to get into the comment section talking about ice cores, show that we've had much higher CO2 in the past. That was way before humans. That was when the planet was in a different state of... The entire biosphere was operating on different different processes. The latest IPCC assessment requires holding temps to 1.5 C, meaning emissions must be cut by 50% by 2030, which means emissions have to decrease rapidly from 2020. Comment: that's an impossibility because of global fossil fuel plans, or glossophobal fuel plans of 120% growth by 2030. We've had 4 separate reports this year on the status of countries meeting or not meeting their mitigation targets to avoid catastrophe. Result: it's basically the end for humanity. We're looking at biosphere collapse, the richness of life being destroyed by deforestation and by catastrophic climate change. Africa is in severe drought. Chile is in mega drought. Australia is in a drought, expected to become a mega drought within the next 2 years. Absolutely nothing is happening to mitigate global warming. Furthermore, nothing will come out of COP25 to mitigate the issue. On the very first day of meetings, Carter was told nations would not be looking at improving their national mitigation targets, which are a joke anyways. Does anybody remember Cory Morningstar in that interview? From, was it Into the Wilderness or whatever that's called? Michael Rupert's old show, when she said that all the nations were on target to meet their emissions goals, but they just want more. Just remember that. I think people stopped talking about Cory Morningstar, but and I think basically that whole idea, has been kind of pushed aside a little bit, but as long as people are still in the comment sections trying to go, did you hear, have you listened to Cory Morningstar? No. Yeah. Stop listening to Cory Morningstar. Furthermore, and chillingly, according to Dr. Carter, currently there's been a massive ongoing eruption of methane in the Arctic. It's gone practically unreported. The only report of it was by the Engineering and Technology Journal. Okay, so I'm going to bring you that report, not today, but probably tomorrow. Barrow, Alaska registered the aforementioned massive bursts of methane into the atmosphere starting in August of this year. We've never seen anything like it, and it has stayed at elevated levels to the present week. Looking at the 2.2 million year ice core, well, there was also a report a few months ago about spiking methane, but I believe that was in Siberia. Looking at the 2.2 million year ice core, the maximum methane concentration ever was 800 parts per billion. In Barrow, Alaska, it is 2,050 parts per billion and staying there. It's been up there for 4 months, which is an ominous warning that has the potential to be a precursor to runaway global warming, burning off mid-latitude agriculture, and categorizing the tropics as way too hot for life. We, Carter, and the scientific community know that really bad things are happening in the Arctic. We also know that the land permafrost is emitting a lot of methane, CO2, and nitrous oxide, 12 times more than scientists estimated. Conclusion: COP25 is a farce, as major countries ignore the threat of global warming by upping the ante on fossil fuels, adding nearly $2 trillion worth of new fossil fuel infrastructure since Paris 15 warned of dangers associated with too much carbon in the atmosphere, a surefire recipe for hothouse Earth. Lest we forget, Venus, our sister planet, has 96.5% CO2 by volume in the atmosphere. On average, temperatures run 864 Fahrenheit. Carbon matters. Postscript: accelerating heating of the Arctic Ocean could make global temperatures skyrocket in a matter of years. Source: Arctic Ocean overheating. Arctic News, September 8th, 2019. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution more than 200 years ago, that's the worst possible news ever. And lastly, in this video, I wanted to read something from Marty McCorkle. I'm going to start doing just a regular... I think I threatened to do this before, but now I'm threatening again. McCorkle's Corner. Because McCorkle leaves so many great comments. And just pick a comment, any comment. It's usually stellar. So I'm going to read this one from, this is, I believe, from December 16th. Societal collapse is as boring as watching grass grow, or in our case, watching grass die, having to plead and beg a set of dull and indifferent leaders to address civilization's giant funeral seems absurd. Trump is an obvious environmental disaster, but Trudeau, a self-proclaimed liberal, in the same sense as I'm a ballerina, sweeps aside the First Nations as if they were the last nations to turn an oil buck. Trudeau unapologetically backs the Canada's tar sands. The dirtiest, highest carbon-emitting fossil fuel extraction process in the world. Trudeau is unapologetically liberal. Canada's government, or neoliberal, Canada's government belches as much CO2 as its defrosting tundra. But Trudeau, the liberal, mouths for a more progressive world, though not a livable one. Sorry, professional mouth movers, but fist bumping or yakking with Greta isn't climate change action. You're bores. Pretend climate change action is a bore. COP25, celebrating 25 years of talking, not doing, to address climate change, is a seat-warming bore. But the kind of bores But the king of bores is having to beg a society not to greenhouse gas itself into a hungry, self-battling stupor. It's like taking fossil fuel-addicted society to the rehab center with an oil pipeline in its suitcase. It's been 25 or more years of this. It's old. It's played. If society does not care about its future, I don't care either. Listen, society. I don't care. Keep consuming, polluting, and cranking out children because it's your funeral. Your society, yours, if you haven't got a quiet separation from society as many commenters have, with its fantasy growth narrative is such a bore that it's comedy gold, easily dismantled with humor. Weird that I don't feel sad anymore about ecological overshoot. Perhaps this uplift is more common than I supposed. Weren't we all supposed to stay bluesy? Like others, getting a clear view of ecological overshoot, our big pickle. I spent sleepless nights of despair last Christmas season. But this one is all sunshine and rose parades. Everything that is important to me, mostly loafing about in ways that this suicidal society frowns upon, gets my urgent and immediate attention. All that I find giantly important is tiny and ant-like to this current dying society. Despair can be put in the grave for a spell, then one pops out like Osiris and is given bonus days, where one ditches the mainstream narrative about what to think, to say, and how to live. When one wises up to being in a world of last things, the society-assigned storyteller takes a fatal trip on the stairs, and on must make up one's own mind. And on which one, it's trying to read the sentence. And on which one must make up one's own story from here on. Sorry. Maybe society's climate change stupidity is boring because real life with ecological overshoot is too seductively short, urgent, and exciting. One begins stuffing way more life into 24 hours than life's user manual suggests. Try and get my reading together. Looking from outside, I am myself a towering bore. Silly, sentimental, corny, out of sync with my cool, collapsed, clueless time, these dooming 20s. As climate change doom becomes more widely experienced, newbies are flooding in. They will go through the door of despair, and many will come out the other side looking like a dead cat, and not a fresh one either. But some will pop like a shimmering field of wild poppies, having the persuasion of a freight train, a charisma like damn it, or leave big holes where social rules once formed a Berlin Wall of no-nos. Onlookers will rack up these personality changes to fried mental circuitry. But the new energy comes from knowing we know we are doomed with bells on, that society is dying despite its denials, that current society's narrative is the title character in Weekend at Bernie's, and that we, in the know of this, are quite lost. Lost being another word for free. We despair veterans are pulling out our previously hidden drum kits and starting to bang away, rocking the old Casbah until its toupee falls into its lap. Bang, womp, thung. Give this guy space. He's on something, the pre-despair say. Yes, he is. He's one of the few people that have stepped into this century by admitting that industrial civilization is simply going away, a giant leap for mankind that makes a footprint on the moon seem positively pedestrian. If done with skill or with an array of happy accidents, walking into the despair makes ayahuasca seem like bathtub gin in comparison. Take a deadly dose of despair and see for yourself. The recommended adult dose of climate change despair kills off society's dead wrong narratives fast. And if the despair doesn't kill you first, you'll awaken refreshed to be bored by society by never being bamboozled by it again. You'll become a lightning bolt to this fast fading society, and depending on your country or county, may have to register yourself as a lethal weapon. So consult your reticent climate scientist to see if climate change despair is right for you. May cause euphoria, comedy, urgency, selfishness, selflessness, and episodes of charisma. If climate change despair depression persists, consider seeking climate change denial assistance from a professional denialist and an anti-scientist, paid oil bamboozler, Trump, Trudeau, or other qualified societal bore representing the interests of this tumble-down society. Did y'all get all of that? Hope you enjoyed it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.